Hi, and welcome to the online service for Studio 45. My name's John Parker, technical coordinator, and while it may look empty now, this is Studio 45 on the weekend.
Studio 45 online service is more than a video, but a part of something amazing. You will learn about some awesome big ideas, which are something God wants to do inside you to change the world around you. Our biggest ideas are the big three, and we hope that while you join us online, that you know that you should treat others the way you want to be treated, make the wise choice, and trust God no matter what. So get your favorite snack, crank up that volume, and get ready because we start in 3, 2, 1.
The Bible is more than a single book. It's a collection of 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry written by dozens of different authors over thousands of years that all come together to tell one big story. It's a bigger story than you can even imagine. It's a big story about a really big God and what He did to rescue us. It shows us who we are and what we were created to do. Discover the story that shows you the character of God.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's good to see you today. You guys did an amazing job singing. Those are a couple of my very favorite songs. I love those songs, and you guys did an amazing job with them. Well, my name is Mrs. Debbie, and I love it when I get to come in here and hang out with you for a little bit and tell you what the Bible has to say about our big idea of... That's right. You guys are much more awake than the first through third graders were, I got to tell you. They kind of had to catch on real slowly to that. Well, let me ask you a question before we get into the Bible story. Now, I don't know if this has happened to anybody else, but sometimes, especially when my kids were growing up and like we were on the way to church or maybe on the way to school or just driving in the car, it's like one kid was poking the other kid and annoying them. And then the other kid poked back and pretty soon there was like this argument going on. He's got more room than I do. She's on my side of the seat and all kinds of stuff like that. Have any of you ever had that kind of thing happen? Yes. So here's the question. Why is it so hard to really be kind to the people that are closest to you? Huh? I mean, we're around them all the time, and sometimes they just get on our nerves, right? Well, today's Bible story is a very cool example of how we can be kind to the people closest to us. I love this story, and I'm so excited that I get to be the one who teaches it. Now, it is in the book of Ruth, and what I'm going to do today is kind of summarize the story. The book of Ruth is in the Old Testament, and it is only 4 chapters long. It is very short. So when you go home this week, you can read it for yourself or maybe read it together as a family with your family. It's a great story to go along with Valentine's Day. It'd be a great story for that. But I'm just going to kind of summarize what happened today so that we can think about kindness and the people close to us. So anyway, the book of Ruth happened after God had already brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt and into their own promised land. But just because they were in their promised land, sometimes there were still bad things that happened. Like sometimes there wasn't enough rain and there was no food. And so one of those times when that happened, there was a man who lived there. He was an Israelite. He lived in that land, and his name was Elimelech. And he said, okay, I'm going to have to move my family someplace where there's food. So he took his wife, Naomi, and his 2 sons, and they moved. Let's see, I have the map here. They moved to the land of Moab, right here on the map, okay? They moved from where they were to a land that had more food, the land of Moab. Now, while they were in Moab, their 2 sons found a couple of pretty girls, and they ended up marrying Moabite girls. So it was Elimelech, Naomi, their 2 sons, and the 2 sons' wives. But while they were in Moab, something really sad happened. Elimelech and both of his sons died. So that left Naomi and Orpah and Ruth, those were the 2 daughter-in-laws, all by themselves. Now, sometime along in there, Naomi heard that there was food again back in her homeland. So she said, okay, I think it's time to go back to my homeland. So she wanted to get back on the road and head back to Bethlehem, where she is from. Who else famous do you know is from Bethlehem, was born in Bethlehem? That's right, Jesus. Very good. See, all these things keep cropping up in the Bible when you really read it. It's so cool. Anyway, she was going to head back to Bethlehem. Now, when she started out, her two daughter-in-laws started out with her. Orpah and Ruth were walking along with her. But they didn't get very far, and Naomi stopped and she said, you know, girls, I appreciate how kind you've been to me, but really, I don't have any more sons for you to marry, and you're probably better off just staying here in Moab where you know all the people and you can be with your own families. The girls didn't want to leave her, but finally Orpah said, okay, I'll go back home with my family. But Ruth, she insisted. She insisted so much that it's recorded here in the book of Ruth in chapter 1, verse 16. I'm going to read it straight from the Bible. Don't try to make me leave you and go back. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. And listen to this. Your God will be my God. Do you see what Ruth had learned while she had been part of that family? She learned that there was something different about people who believed in the one true God. And she wanted that for herself. She wanted to continue to be part of that. So Ruth and Naomi went on and kept traveling all the way back to what town? That's right. Now, when they got there, Naomi had a sad story to tell. She had to tell her friends and family what had happened to her husband and sons, and they could kind of see it on her face. She was still very sad. She really kind of thought her life was over. But here's the thing. When they got back, it was the harvest time. Now, I'm kind of changing the subject for just a second, but stay with me. It was harvest time there. Now, back in those days, of course, they didn't have big harvesting machines. People had to go out in the fields, and by hand, they had to pick the grain. And there was a job of all these harvesters to go out and pick the grain. But there was something special that had to be remembered. They didn't pick all the grain. There was always some grain left on the ground. Now, here's why. That's because God wanted the people to remember that there would always be someone in need. And part of the way they could help those people in need was by leaving some grain on the ground for them to pick up so they would have food for their own families. So as the harvesters were going through, they would always leave a little bit of grain. And then the people who came behind, it was called gleaning the field. They would go back in and they would pick up that extra grain. Now, that's not really something we do today. But you know what? When I was in high school, I actually had an opportunity to glean in a field. That might sound pretty weird, but I was on a basketball team, and our basketball team needed new uniforms, and we needed to find a way to get some money. So a farmer let us go out in his field after his machine had gone through and harvested all the corn, and let us pick up the extra corn. And we made enough money to buy our uniforms. That's how important gleaning was back in those days. So Ruth said, ding, ding, that's a way I can help our family out, me and Naomi. I can go out and glean in the fields. And so she asked Naomi, she said this, let me go out to the fields. I'll pick up the grain that has been left. I'll do it behind anyone who is pleased with me. Naomi agreed. I'm sure she was very thankful because she was probably wondering, how are we going to exist without some men here in our family? What are we going to be able to do? So Ruth went out and she began to pick up some of the grain that was left. She worked in the heat of the day. She worked all day long, only stopping one time for a little break in the shade. Yes, one time. And while she was working, the owner of the field came by. His name was Boaz. Now, Boaz saw Ruth out there, and he talked to the head man over his harvesters, and he said, hey, who is that out there in the field? And the head guy told him, her name is Ruth. She's the daughter-in-law of Naomi. Now, a twist in the story. Boaz knew Naomi very well because he was related to Naomi's old husband, Elimelech. So when Boaz saw how hard Ruth was working, he walked over to her and he said, please keep harvesting in my field. You can continue to glean here as much as you want. And he said, if you get thirsty, go ahead and stop and take a drink. That tastes good when you've been out working in the field. And you know what? Then he went to his harvesters and he said, hey, leave a little extra grain for Ruth so she has something to pick up. So all day long, Ruth picked up the grain that was left behind the harvesters. And when she went home that evening and Naomi saw all the grain she had collected, she wondered whose field had Ruth been in. And Ruth told her she had worked in the field of Boaz. And this is what Naomi said. I'm going to read it straight from the Bible. May the Lord bless him. That man is a close relative of ours. He is one of our family protectors. Now that's really important, but I don't have time to really tell you all the details about that. But what that meant was that one day down the road, Boaz and Ruth would be married. Not only did they get married, they had, a precious baby boy. And they named him Obed. And you know what? Obed was the grandfather of somebody very famous, King David. And that means that Obed was also in the family line of Jesus. How cool how God works all those details out and brings everything together. But what I really want you to understand from the story today is that there was a lot of kindness shown, wasn't there? I mean, Ruth showed kindness, first of all, to Naomi by going with her back to Bethlehem, to a place she had never been and where she didn't have any other relatives. And then she worked hard in the field and gathered the grain and provided for them. And then Boaz recognized how hard Ruth was working, and his kindness allowed her to get plenty of grain, and not only that, to one day marry her so that she would be provided for, and so would Naomi. But all of this kindness goes back to what I said back in the beginning when I read to you why Ruth wanted to stay with Naomi. Remember what I said? Your God will be my God. Ruth realized that true kindness comes from God first. God knows each and every one of us. He knows every single thought we think. And yet God still loves us and shows us kindness. And when we realize how kind God is to us, how can we help but be kind to others in return and share that kindness? That's exactly what Ruth did. That's exactly what Boaz did. And that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. When you think about those times when you're just getting annoyed by maybe that brother or sister, or maybe it's some other relative, or maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's like your best friend, but one day they're just annoying you like crazy. Remember to show kindness. Remember to be kind to those closest to you because of the kindness God has shown you. Now, I know you guys always have a question of the week, and you might talk about it in a little bit, but I'm going to let you start thinking about it. When is it hard to be kind? When is it hard? Think about that, and let's talk to God about that right now. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? Father in heaven, you are so good to us. Thank you for sharing the story of Ruth in the Bible so that we could see a great example of kindness through Ruth and through you, Father. Your plan is so amazing. Now, Father, as we go throughout this week, I just pray that we would look for opportunities to be especially kind to those who are closest to us. And we'll give you all the praise and glory. And all God's people said, amen. Thank you guys. You're great listeners.